It's a new moon in Aquarius, new beginnings, new innovation, innovation,
Mm.
innovation. So, welcome back to another episode in the Inner Tapestry Series. Today's been a very interesting day so far, and Red and I are over here having all the little tech wizard issues. So, we're holding down the fort, holding the energy bubble. Now that we're live, we're just going to hold the vision that it's going to stay stable. It's like
Mm.
you literally cannot do a live stream about energy work and this deep, subtle realm stuff without technology being like, wait a minute, what are you doing?
That is true. That is true.
So, as I said, welcome back to another episode of the Inner Tapestry series. Today, we're actually extending the conversation from our last episode, which was on shadow and light. We're going to go even deeper into flowing with the shadow and light today and what that looks like. And Red and I are already actively in this process. We were just flowing with the shadow of technology. And, that is a shadow that we have as we're separated across vast distances of space, yet we have this means to communicate through technology, but it doesn't always work the way we want it to. So, Red, if you would be so kind as to go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience.
My name is Red Moon Eagle. I am a psychic catalyst, an energy worker, a healer's healer, a healer's teacher. And one of the things that I wanted to start off with today is that shadow is so prominent in everything we do. And every activity that anxiety, that fear, whatever that shadow is that bubbles up, wow, we have so many tools to work through this. And when we bump up against it, like we were having with the technology, it's okay. What are my tools? What are the things that I can do? How do I turn this off, turn this back on again? What devices do I need to switch? How do I turn this off? How do I turn this on? And not letting the anxiety, right? And that fear and that anticipation, that shame, fear, disappointment cycle kick in. And so that's what we've been working on. And as you hit your smudge and I took my ETS, I felt the energy, that bubble being held and going, okay, let's flow with it. Let's allow it to happen. And what's the lesson in that? What are we supposed to be paying attention to?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what came through for me, is that the process of being imperfect in this world and our ability to pivot if we need to, right? If ultimately we had not been able to go on this call, the world wouldn't have ended. Now, old, right? Very trapped in the societal disharmonized light, right? Because we're going to continue this light and shadow conversation. The disharmonized light looks like I have to show up and I have to do it and I have to be perfect. And oh my God, I'm not allowed to change my mind. And so as we were like, okay, let's just see what it's gonna be. There was that inner peace that was able to come with that. Like, okay, whatever happens, happens. It's not the end of the world. So I love that. And I love being at that place in my life. And just in case you don't know me, I'm Safrianna Luna, the queer spirit guide. And I love to guide people through the journey of their light and shadows and dance with it. So last week we got into this profound conversation about the relationship between the light and the shadow. And Red, you started to talk about the fourth dimension. And this was like a new perspective for me. And, whenever you give me a new perspective, I sit with it. And as soon as I started to sit with it, this image came through and I ended up drawing it. So I want to just kind of walk through this and then we can use this to orient our conversation. So Red was sharing about this fourth dimension of, ascension, of getting into higher levels of self-awareness, and she started to describe having this flow with light and shadow and it coming into us, and I had this image of these cords, this dark cord and this light cord, but they are an infinity symbol that's actually feeding in this loop. And when we can connect this and anchor into this safely in our heart space and know it's a process of flow, it does bring us into this higher level of like, oh, I can handle whatever I need to handle. Cool, because I'm just going to continue to follow this beautiful flow. So I was wondering if you would speak more to this fourth dimension that you were sharing and what what do people need to hear about that?
I think you touched on it at the very beginning. You touched on time because there's an impression with fourth dimension that it's all about time, and that is, I very rarely say things are wrong, but I would say let's reframe that. Let's reframe the perceptions of what time are in regards to that shadow light dimensional connection of that flow. Because fear is one of those things that people think. So I'm going to kind of touch on a few things to kind of weave it all together here because it's multifaceted. We are going beyond that third dimension of to see it, taste it, touch it, smell it, sense it, whatever. I can never get
Mhm.
all five senses in the right order. So when we go past this three-dimensional world into that fourth dimension, you have to start looking at what makes that a fourth dimension in regards to the light and shadow work, that infinity of flow between the light and the shadow in space. And space and time, um, people think of fear as fear holds you back,
Mm.
fear entraps you, fear keeps you. People use fear as a weapon all the time, right?
Right.
It's a controlling thing, right? Well, fear isn't an entrapment. Fear is part of the light and shadow rhythm and flow. And when I tell people I'm not afraid of things, but I have been afraid of behaviors or outcomes, or I've had anxiety about things, but I've when I tell people I've never met an entity I'm afraid of, they look at me and they're like, but what about the person who killed somebody? Or aren't you afraid somebody's going to hurt you? I went, I do get afraid of people's behaviors, right? But I've never met an entity that is what this big boogeyman or monster under the table that this entity is going to come out and mind control me and shove me into a black case and carry me off into a spaceship or whatever these weird stories are. Like
These stories,
I
yes.
don't even, it's not a, when you think of that fourth dimension, that breakthrough, and that breakthrough is the recognition of the flow of light and shadow and recognizing that the emotion of fear is part of the rhythm and flow. And it is just as much a part of the rhythm and flow as joy and bliss and this beautiful place of resonance also flows back into fear for a moment and then flows back to bliss and joy and flows back to fear and anxiety and worry and flows back to joy and love and compassion, and there's a flow back and forth through this, and your image is so profound in the connection to the physiological realm of our three-dimensional touch it, feel it, taste it, smell it, whatever the senses are, through the physical body, and breaking through the paradigm that fear is not, it doesn't have the power to control that people are using it for. It doesn't
Mhm.
have that power. It doesn't even, I don't even, I really have a hard time with that conceptualization. Like maybe that is because it's that fourth dimension breakthrough that once you break through into that fourth dimension awareness, time is compacted through fear. Think about how I'll use today's I'll use today's live. Like it's way past 11:40, right? Or 11:45 or whatever it is, right? And I'm like really just troubleshooting. And then I realize as I'm sitting here waiting for my second computer to log on and I go, "Oh, we're going to be a little late." And I thought, "Well, this is a good example." I even thought that in my head, like this is an amazing example of breaking through that time fear place
Mhm.
into the realm of acceptance and flow and connection.
Yes.
Does that help?
Yes, that the acceptance, flow, and connection, those words right there, I think are so indicative of what's actually important, right? I explore with people all the time how spiritual on the fifth dimensional level, right? That complete energy processing spiritual level, we can process like that. Done. No time at all, right? Because it's outside of
Mm-hmm.
time. But here in the 3D, we do perceive time, we perceive this concept of sequential order. And if we're expecting the 3D to look like the 5D, we end up very disappointed. And so I'm seeing even now this overlay as we're talking between the 3D and the 5D, the fourth dimension being this flow, this infinite flow between the spiritual and the spiritual and the physical, the light and the dark, and the unseen and the seen, and all the polarities that this universe is built on. So that was something I, as I look at this, and I felt like today was a show and tell day. I'm working on this painting that's a yin and yang
Woo!
with spiders, which I also feel like very much shows the relationship between the shadow and light, right? They're intertwined.
Yes.
We have this beautiful yin and yang symbol that's been um, here on earth for us for a very long time. Like, all of these ancient systems of wisdom have been showing us this dance between light and shadow. And that is the rules this universe has seemingly been built on, or at least here on this planet. I can only assume the rest of the universe, because science seems to be showing us that this universe is built on polarity and magnetism, and north and south, and all of these multi dimensions of perception.
Well, yeah, I mean, science is expanding too, right?
Mm.
Like, as as we work in the connection between the third, the fourth, the fifth realm, as we're working through these quantum connections, science itself is starting to prove those things. I've said it since I was a little kid. Like, there are things I know that I'm just waiting for science to catch up on. And there's a quality of fourth dimension that goes with that, because I remember when I was younger, I remember being very like, hurry it up, just hurry it up and do the thing. And now I don't do that. I'm ready to breathe into when science gets there. It's not a hurry up and get there, it's a when science gets there. Because as I too have grown, just like everybody grows, like, I'm not in a vacuum. I haven't reached the end of whatever it is of knowingness, right?
Right.
Like, every person you come in contact with shows you a shadow of yourself, mirrors back your light and your shadow. And every time you have a conflict or something that's disruptive in your day-to-day life, the guy that's in front of you that's going too slow, or you run to the gas station and the person snaps at you, or whatever it is, those are all reflections of how you're flowing within that that infinite eight, light, shadow. Are you their trigger? Are they your trigger? Is that reflection meant for you to flow with it? Are you supposed to breathe through that? What are your tools that you're going to use in that to maintain your connection to that fourth dimension outside of time? It's really interesting, because people think that fourth dimension is about time as a construct, as a linear concept.
Hmm.
Fourth dimension has nothing to do with time in a linear concept. Fourth dimension has to do with the release of connection to the concept of time
Oh my gosh.
and that flow. Yes. I figured you had a drawing. I figured you had a drawing.
Welcome to my perception of time as we know it, because time is past, present, future. It's all in one. It's all happening right now. It's here, right? Here's the now. Our actual perception of dropping into our multi dimensions and being able to perceive everything at once, which is where all of these tools come in so that we can achieve getting to here. But we never stay here
Mm-mm.
permanently. We go and we bounce and we're all over the place. And, you know, coming back to this, we're here and then we're here and then we're here and then we're here and then we're in the middle. And like, I think that the biggest challenge that people have these days is that there is no end, and that's life. Like, this flow
Or
of life is the infinite.
yeah, it's not just the end, but there's also the formula. Everybody, not everybody, but I have definitely run across this a lot lately. It's interesting. Back to shadow and light flow. There was a point in time where it seemed like I didn't run into that a lot with clients, and now I'm back to it. So it's obviously something that's bubbling up, and that
Collective
thing that's
stuff.
bubbling up, yeah, that thing that's bubbling up is, what is the formula? Hey, Red, I've just spent money and time to see you. Now I want to know, what are the things I have to do to get to what I'm doing, right? And I'm like, um, okay, we have to talk about nothing is linear. There is no formula. I can give you basic outline and I can expound upon each one of those things in the outline. I'm writing a book. I'm working on this plethora of taking these basic things and writing this big, involved thing. And I'm still trying to keep it really simple because the reality is that what works for one person may not work for another in the same order, in the same process. And our world is already telling us through media and social media and YouTube and movies and television and books, they're all telling us read this self-help book and it's going to help you finish, right? It's going to help you finish to be where you are supposed to be, whatever that
Right.
thing is. It's as though the one thing you're supposed to be doing is only one thing.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna sit and weave thread. That's my one thing. That's the only thing I'm gonna do. That's not how it works. And the paradigm that fear has been added on top of that, that if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, you're not going to be profitable, you're not going to be successful, you're not going to
Mhm.
be loved, you're not going to be part of a community, like
Right.
that fear paradigm. When I talk to people about shadow work, first off, I recommend everybody have a counselor. So there's that. I start there.
Yes.
Second thing is I talk about it as it's a gradual unfolding. It's a slow emergence. What's the thing you're afraid of? Dial into it, work on it, let it go. Go over here, this other thing you're afraid of. Work on that. Dial in, let it go. Go over here and work on this other thing. They may be on juxtapositions a mile apart in topic or idea, but that's part of that fourth dimensional flow, that ability to come into that fourth dimensional awareness and let time be time, right? Be time, but not be time, and allow the right thing at the right time flow where it needs to. And when you're trying to grab onto it, hold onto it for dear life, you're no longer in a flow. You're not allowing the emotions to flow. You're not allowing things to happen that need to happen. You're not allowing the universe to validate your process because that's also fourth dimension. Fourth dimension is where that validation comes through.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Like, so I'm super excited. Red just joined on the Shadow Alchemy project. I'm like over here beyond the moon. And we just closed enrollment, and with enrollment was like a chapter closing with it. And I'm sitting here. It's this new moon in Aquarius today. I'm looking back at like the last 3 months because this cycle with this book project opened in November. And so that's, looking at time and how things have unfolded. Unsurprisingly, launching a project called Shadow Alchemy, the universe was like, "Hello, we're going to give you plenty to work with," and that's this has been my experience because it's literally been this constant, like, wow, I'm so glad I'm doing this. This is wonderful and brilliant, and it's changing the world. And then, like, damn it, I hate every moment of this. Now I'm in the trauma and I have to take this trauma out and I'm going to look at it and I'm crying and I'm a mess.
Oh,
Oh, wow,
yeah.
how beautiful that was. Oh my gosh, I feel so much more relief and release now. And I'm understanding myself so much back into the dark, right? Like, it is this
Mm-hmm.
constant ebb and flow, and it's been brilliant, truly. And so I'm like, cool, I'm here, I'm doing this fourth dimensional stuff, and I'm literally learning that active process of flowing with it in a way that I have been throughout my whole life, but it's that deepening level of awareness. I see it as putting layers back on the onion, right? Like, we start with this much knowledge and then we're like, oh, and now this dimension, and now this dimension, and now this dimension. And so it's just cool to look back. And when we're outside of the, like, it has to happen in perfect, or it has to happen in this time, and we can accept divine time or flow and the infinite nature of this, it's like so much more symbolic and beautiful and nourishing, and it's definitely not so scary.
No, it's not scary at all. And, you know, years ago when I first started my daily devotional thing, I was really like on top of it. I was doing it every single day. And then I got overwhelmed and I quit doing it for a while. And then I came back to it and I was like, I'm going to do it a certain way because the world, like the 3D world, tells me you have to do it a certain way. And I've always struggled with that, with anything that had to do with elemental healing, anything that has to do with elemental healing. It has been a constant, I don't understand why the 3D world, why the world that everybody else seems to understand the rules, which I don't seem to get the rules to begin with. So there's that. But back to, it's always made so complex in a way that didn't make sense to me. And it's only in the last, I'd say the last year, because I restarted right before Samhain in 2022, and I ran through the cross quarter wheel. And this year I'm running through the solar wheel, so I'm going solstice to solstice. And as I was running at the beginning, way back at Samhain, and I had restarted it again, I remember having the internal dialogue with myself and my higher self and my guides and saying, I'm going to follow the Samhain calendar. And one of the things I'm going to honor about Samhain and the connection to my ancestors is my ancestors didn't give a flying F about the clock on the wall. My great grandmother never paid attention to the clock on the wall. She didn't even understand why everybody was married to it. My grandmother, who was a little bit more married to it, never was on time for anything in her life. She was either early or she might as well not have gone. And I totally inherit that time sense. I either am early or I shouldn't go because I'm so late, it don't matter. And I've always accepted that part of myself, but with daily devotions, I went a little deeper. I went a little deeper with the elemental healing acknowledgement that there's a reason why nothing with elemental healing, nothing with my business and what my purpose here to do has ever matched a timeline that makes sense. And I let it go. Yeah. So I bank videos. If I don't show up live, I'll just post one. Like sometimes I'm there at 6 and sometimes it's 5:30 and sometimes it's 7. And I don't worry about it. And it goes completely against every marketing, every platform formula, everything every business tells you to do the thing. But I will tell you that is a fear paradigm. Mm-hmm. That is a do these things. It's not do these things to be successful. They couch it as though it's a positive thing. But it's back to that toxic positivity that healers do. We've talked about that, where they're not really healing. it's turning it from fear. It's, oh, these are the things that make you successful. Hence, if you do not do these things, you are in fear and you're not doing it right and you will fail. Right. That is a terrible thing to tell somebody. Why would you do that? That's awful.
To make more money.
Right.
Right.
But what's money gonna do you
when you're avoiding your shadows and you're not in any flow whatsoever and you're hemorrhaging relationships and happiness because you are unable to flow with the actual nature of life.
And you're alone. People talk about being alone, like, oh, I've made all this money and I'm standing on the precipice of absolute destitution of emotional connection. They are so destitute and alone. They have all the money in the world, but they're lonely and they're miserable and they have no connection to people.
Yeah. Or they have
That's
one connection
sad.
or, very limited because
and unhealthy.
Because they're in an unhealthy paradigm. Yeah, I've been talking, I know this is a slight deviation, but I'm sure it relates in this ultimate flow, is the concept of, and I haven't heard other people talk about this a lot yet. So the words that have come through for me are clear money and dirty money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the thing.
The clear money can flow with the light and the shadow. And dirty money tries to ignore the shadow and stay in that disharmonized light of we have to keep producing, we have to keep going, we have to meet the deadlines, we have to be on time, we have to be locked into constantly shining the light, right? Like we have a sun and a moon. We have a sun and a moon, and the sun is pattern,
Yeah.
it's rhythmic, it rises and, goes down every day, and it's
Yeah.
pretty steady, but then the moon is ebbing and flowing, and it takes its time, right? It's over a longer period, and people, because we live in a polarized existence, people fall somewhere between these two spectrums, but we're never supposed to be all in that light, the sun. Every day I get up and I do the same darn thing and I go, 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 go. Like everyone would burn out if they only ever followed that flow.
Yeah. Because it isn't a flow. I mean, that's the disjunct with it. It's a circle, it's
Cycle.
a whirlpool. It is a whirlpool of dysfunction. I talk about it all the time with clients about their, when people are all worried about their karma, right? I go, it's a karmic whirlpool. You're just spinning. Have you watched a whirling dervish? Have you ever watched a tornado? I mean, they are just spinning and they are destroying everything in their path because there's no actual flow in the cycle of light and shadow. And dirty money, I'll give you an experience of dirty money that I had a real good experience with this one. I don't share it very often. I normally just share it with practitioners, but I think it is so appropriate for the shadow light discussion. Way back, oh goodness, I think we're looking at 7 or 8 years ago now. Wow, long time ago. Um, so for years and years and years, when I charged, I didn't charge. I basically went, whatever you want to pay me, you pay me. It's the paradigm I lived in because I didn't understand how to manage the shadow part of that discussion with money. Not that I was afraid of it, but I didn't have the right tools. So I just didn't. When
Right.
you don't have the right tools, I didn't want to mess anything up, but I also didn't know how to fix it either. And I had this amazing person that came into my life. She was a naturopathic physician. And she said, Red, you got to charge. Like, you got to charge. You got to have like a baseline. And I went, how do I do that? I don't know how to do it. Like, talk about anxiety. I was like,
Yeah.
wow. And she goes, well, I will rent you a space and this is what I will charge you. So this is where you start. You start with what is your rent? What are your expenses? Deduct those and then look at what do you want to make an hour? And I went, where do I go with that? Right? Like, um, gross or net? Of course, that's my answer. Like, I'm going to go to the
Give me
absolute
more
detail.
detail.
Like, how do I determine that? And she goes, okay, that's a good question. So add in like, what would you charge? What would your insurance be? What would be, she helps me like, she helped me create a formula so that you knew what to charge. And so that's what I started with. And it was really simple. It was $100. It just happened to work out that way. I went, oh God, wow, that was easy. Whew. Okay, $100. I'm going to charge $100 an hour. And so I had probably about, I don't know, 15 or 20 clients in the space of like 2 or 3 months. It's not like all of a sudden I was busy. I mean, I was working a full time job and I was doing this. Talk about burnout. That's a whole different story. Um, but, and this person came in my door and they were there for a download. And at the time, I was charging not very much for a download, and I was still spending 4 to 6 hours with them, sometimes 8 hours. I had an 8 hour download. I will never do that again. Anyway, so you learn. I learned. I
We
continually
learn. Yep.
learn. I learned. I've done it the wrong way. Trust me. I seem to do that first. But that particular person, when they walked in the door, I knew that they weren't ready. And I knew it because their guide said they weren't ready. My guide said they weren't ready. And I did attempt to say, you're not ready. We should not do this. And the person turned up the fear dial in their energy field and in their emotions. And they were very attached to telling me all the people that had told them to come see me. And maybe I could just answer 1 or 2 questions. And by that point, they had sat in that office for 40 minutes while I'm trying to tell them this is not going to work, right? And this person, as a last ditch effort, pulled out 5 $100 bills and put them on the table. Way more than I was charging.
Yeah.
And I let them talk me into doing something that I should not have done. And that's dirty money.
Yep.
It was awful. And the fallout from that was this one person started going around town telling people all these horrible things about me because they weren't ready for their own light and shadow reflection through that blueprint, right? They
Yeah.
weren't ready for it. And my shame, guilt, disappointment, mostly all in myself. It's not at anybody else. It was very much I had to go through my own shadow recognition of, oh, okay, here, like you have this formula you figured out and you were already not sure, and you've always let people just pay you what you think it's worth, and you talked yourself into, I talked myself into thinking, well, they must think $500 is what this is worth, and maybe I can just bypass my intuition, right? Like, oh, it was bad.
Yeah.
And I didn't see anybody for like 2 or 3 months after that. It was
Mm.
pretty awful. And on top of it, that dirty money cascaded into other parts of my life. I had um we had this weird thing come out of nowhere, this debt that didn't exist, but it existed. Oh, yeah, it was
Hmm.
bad. It was awful. Like, I really had to do a lot of shadow work,
Yeah.
shadow and light, and walking through my own healing process before that dirty money got cleansed. You know what I ended up doing? That exact $500 was this weird debt that came out of nowhere. I ended up donating that $500 to a nonprofit in town, and that debtor disappeared, never showed up again. Like, I had to clean the money energetically.
Yes.
I had to release my attachment to that money, that idea of, well, I'm doing a good thing.
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm allowing somebody to pay me for my services and my gift, but I didn't do the thing I should have done, which is hold my ground and say, no, I cannot
Hold your
help you.
knowing.
Hold the knowing. And that's part of shadow work with healers. When you're holding so much onto the positivity, like you're married to the, we're only going to be positive, we're never going to let a negative word come into our language, we're going to only be in the light, we're only going to let the light shine on us, we're only going to have the wings of whatever angel shine through us or whatever. I've heard some weird stuff. I pull stuff out of it because I hear this stuff and I kind of go, what, where did that even come from? It's so toxic, it's so shadowed light. It's poisoned. It's
It's
dirty.
yeah, that's what I
It's
call, the difference between harmonized and disharmonized. And I know you and I have had a conversation before. When you were talking earlier, it kind of came back into my head of why we don't need to fear entities is they're either on blueprint or off blueprint. They're either
off blueprint. That's
harmonized
it.
or disharmonized. And
Correct.
there's a harmonized light and a harmonized shadow and a disharmonized light and a disharmonized shadow, and that everyone thinks the disharmonized light is the right way to be, and that the harmonized shadow needs to be avoided. And it's like,
Oh
no, how
no!
about we just
Oh my
harmonize it
goodness!
all? Come into this flow.
I had somebody ask me not very long ago. They were like, "Red, you never get angry. Do you ever get angry? Why don't you ever get angry?" And I went, "Have you not known me? Like, I have a full range of emotions like everybody else.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I'm quite effusive in my range of emotion. I'm very expressive because the feelings, the emotions of the moment are the healthy emotions of the moment. If
Mhm.
I'm anxious or sad or upset, I was once told many, many, many years ago that I needed to control my vacillation of
Mm.
emotion. And they said it a little differently. I mean, this is how I'm interpreting it at 50 years old or however much old I am. And I realized that they were afraid of their own vacillation of
Yep.
emotion. Like they had that own internal fear, but I didn't know it at the time. What I was standing there just confused, going, Am I the only person that has all these range of emotion? Like I read poetry and I read fiction and I read nonfiction, I read memoirs and I read history and I watch movies, and these television shows that shows these range of emotions. So I know I can't be alone.
It's the
So
acceptance of it.
right, like I go into a space and people are like, "Oh my God, Red, you're like everywhere. You're just bouncing all over the place." I went, "Yeah, because I flow with the energy, right?
Mhm.
I'm not an empath. I'm not going to feel what the empaths around me feel. I don't get that feedback loop. I don't have that gift. So I am kind of walking around in a skin suit alone and with my own emotions because I'm not picking up the emotions from anybody around me. So it probably does seem a little overwhelming to the empaths around me because the person that told me that years ago was an empath. So it kind of makes sense. Like I'm probably a little big emotionally comparatively to someone who's trying to relegate or restrain their own range of emotion because of the fear of that feedback loop
Mhm.
that does come from other empaths. If you have two empaths in a room, I felt that you felt that I felt that, and then I felt that you felt that I felt that you felt that, and you felt that I felt that you felt that I felt that you felt that. And it's just this, who the hell knows who's what's feeling, 10 minutes down the line, of course you're going to be confused. So if you've got somebody in the room like me who's like, ding, 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 yeah, it probably does seem a little overwhelming. And two empaths that are doing that together, I can see that being a little chaotic. But part of the beauty of empathy, I went through a huge grief phase in my life where I wanted to be empathic so bad. I I would seek out books written by empaths because I was like, well, maybe I do have it wrong. Maybe I could somehow become empathic. I'm willing to try. I tried everything, Safrianna. I have tried everything. I cannot tell you how much I've tried everything, and it's not there. But now I realize that each gift has this amazing superpower, and we have these amazing things we can teach each other. And in relation to shadow and light with emotion, we all have the capacity for this huge range.
Mhm.
And it is this beautiful experience that we all should be able to have within our. You are the only one in your meat suit. There's nobody else in there, as far as I know. Never met anybody that's got two of them. I say that reluctantly, but that's a whole different conversation.
You know,
Anyway, um,
because there's people like me
and
who are complicated, but
complex, right? Complicated, um, but and you have the right to experience all the range of your emotions. You have the right to experience them, express them, live with them, and share them. That is a beautiful thing to share with anybody around you. I'm just a little bit like peanut butter with a 2-year old on bread. Like I just smear my peanut butter everywhere.
but you
You know,
don't do it in a like, and this is the difference between harmony and disharmony, right? Like
yeah,
having our emotions and experiencing them and standing in the power of them is different than splatting them on other people intentionally or taking it out on them or blaming
yeah,
them or things like that. It's that positive self-ownership of I'm allowed to have my full range. I know in my partnerships we've had a lot of conversations because society has shamed crying so much, right? Like
oh
don't
yeah,
cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. And I'm still in the process of reclaiming my ability to cry because of that. But me crying and just expressing myself through tears while I'm sitting there having an experience is not me taking it out on anybody. It's not me splatting it on them. If they have a feeling about it, that's because they don't know how to express that in themselves. And so that's the
yeah,
harmony and the disharmony. And so sometimes we are harmonized with our emotions and we're able to flow with them. And that's showing other people where they can go next, what their
yes,
next challenge is because they're not in this. They're cycling, they're going down that
right.
spiral that nope, I just
Mm-hmm,
have to stay in the light and the light looks like happiness and the shadow is where the sadness happens and not even. That's
mm-mm.
not even like the shadow and the light aren't good and bad or low vibe and high vibe either. They
Nope,
are
no,
everything.
they're
They're all of
everything.
the information.
Yes, Oh, I had a conversation, I think yesterday, no, day before yesterday. And it was very much this high low. I made a statement. I went, oh, I'm going to quantify that with this is not a better or worse,
Mhm.
higher or lower. Because part of the download process is talking about vibrational frequency. And I can't tell you how many times somebody, I explain how their frequency works in their blueprint, and they go to somebody else who had their download and they're like, well, I'm a this and you're a that. And I'm like, oh, whoa, stop.
Superiority.
Uh-uh, absolutely not. That has nothing to do with it. And the idea that to be enlightened, right, means that you never go to a negative place in your mind. You never think negatively about somebody, or you never get frustrated, or you never have anxiety, or you never have whatever it is that people are perceiving to be better or worse,
Bad.
is so toxic. It reinforces this fear paradigm. I've said for years, and I can't say it enough, the karmic trap is the us versus them, me versus you, me versus the universe, them versus me, and holding on to something that doesn't belong to you, and you add fear into that, of course you're going to swirl around in this karmic loop of what about this? What about this? What about this? I mean, I see clients all the time where they're like, well, I read this thing, social media or whatever, where something, something, something about their gut brain biome. And they're like, so I'm doing this gallbladder cleanse. And I'm like, why? There's nothing wrong with your gallbladder. And they're like, but I might be. There might be something wrong with my gallbladder. I'm like, okay, but if you focus on it, you're giving a lot of fear to that part of your body. You might end up with some
Yep, might
gallbladder
end up with
problems,
some problems.
right? Like, you have to be careful what you're holding on to with that fear. And when something triggers the fear, part of the dimensional journey, right? Back to that dimensional journey is allowing yourself to flow with the fear. I've spent a lot of discussions with natural number sixes recently, and every natural number six has this amazing manifestation ability, right? They can manifest, you throw them negative, they're going to throw it back at you. And a natural number six has this amazing ability to take all this information and go, I'm going to do the thing, or I'm not going to do the thing, or this is the next thing to do. And if they get caught in a fear cycle, they will talk themselves quite methodically through how to end up doing the thing that they said they weren't going to do, or talk themselves out of a thing that they said they were going to do. They will, and they are the best rationalizers. Like, out of all the natural numbers, I have never witnessed something so fascinating. And it's not from a place of judgment. I will tell you that I've I was more confused for a while there, and then I went, "What is happening?" Like, they were right. Their guides are telling me that they were right with the first decision, and yet they ended up all the way over here. So I do things like, "What made you do that? What were you thinking? How did you get there? Why did you change your mind?" Like, and every time I walk through that with a natural number six, we always get back to fear. They
Mhm.
have feared their way into the opposite of what they knew to do at the moment. And it's an amazing process to watch somebody walk back through it, walk away and out of the fear and get back to that place of rightness. And your natural number influences your shadow light. So if you know where your trigger is, your natural number, like shadow trigger, because every
Right.
natural number has that shadow trigger. We talked about that. If you know what it is, you can walk your way back through it. You can go through that full cycle up into that fourth dimensional weave and move past through it to release that shadow part.
Right.
But I will tell you that sixes have a hard time with the time thing because they're afraid, fear, they're often afraid that if they do that, they're going to miss something else. Boy, they have a hard time with that time thing. Every
Yeah.
natural number six I've worked with, they have a hard time with that time thing because they know the right time of action. When their six is on and they're making the decision in the right space, and they haven't gone to the fear place, there is no time in that. They're already out into that fourth dimension. They're doing exactly the thing at the right time in the right place.
Flow, flow, flow,
They're
right?
already
Following
flowing, right?
the path.
Right. But as soon as they allow fear to come in, they bump back into third dimension, and they're just swirling, 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 swirling. It's fascinating to watch, with a lot of grace and compassion. And you have to like breathe for them and help them kind of walk through it, because you can. But it's definitely a thing I've seen over and over and over again with every single natural number six so far that I've worked with, that I know is a six. Um, and that shadow like process is dimensionally connected in how your body's activated, where your natural energies are, what are your gifts. Like, it's all interplaying.
Yeah. It's like when I drew this, of course, it came into my heart center and my back because my
Yeah.
natural number is in my back. And so I'm
Mm-hmm.
so curious how other people would end up perceiving this because this could be very similar to a six's flow. But would
Mm-hmm.
these chords be connected, a little lower for a two or into these different regions of the body? And it's something that I want to keep studying more and
Oh
asking
yeah.
questions and getting to know because I do definitely believe that there is a unique flow in the shadow and light process for each body vessel because it is the 3D and the 5D, right? The 5D blueprint up here and all of our gifts that we can't always see the manifestation of, right? It's the unseen realm. Some of us can go up
Mm-hmm.
and see it, cool. But we all have access to it in some way, shape, or form.
Everybody. Everybody.
But then the 3D is obviously very in our face. It's very tangible. So it's easy to get lost in just here and not realize that there's this infinite flow happening between and that's why I love this, like, oh my gosh, okay, I get the tie-in between. I was always like, why are we jumping from this to the 5D? Like what's in between? And now I see it is the flow. It's the tubes. It's the how the information is getting cycled between the we call it the multi there's everything's multidimensional. The 5D,
Right.
the spiritual realm, the energy realms, and this physical tangible.
It's really interesting that the very first time I heard about like 5D jumping timelines and everything, and I thought, well, that's an interesting way to explain it. And I didn't realize that what I was hearing was not known. I really didn't understand that people were talking about it, because I thought everybody knew this thing. And then the other side of it was, but they're missing. They're missing that release and that flow out of our perception of time into the continuity and the coherence of our connection through all of the realms. I have really been fascinated in the last couple of years of how this discussion has become so out there, because I didn't realize it wasn't. I really didn't for a long time. I just thought I hadn't met people that were talking about it, because I knew it was a thing, and
Right.
I'd talk about it, and eyes would glaze over, and people would promptly kind of go, I think you went somewhere, Red, that we can't follow. And I'd go, okay,
Uh,
and then I just move on, right? Like, I didn't push it, because I learned a long time ago that my awareness of things sometimes isn't easy to explain. So I can start with words, and if the words don't match, people's eyes glaze over and they kind of want me to stop, and they wander away.
well,
They
and
run away
that gets
sometimes.
into our gift packages as well. And I studied something called the Starchetype system. It was channeled by a natural number four named Saoirse Claire McGovern, and it's these four. She calls them star families. These four energy types that perceive on various levels the 3D and the 5D. And
Mm-hmm.
so the flow between the two realms is different. Like my natural number two partner is a guardian family. They're very down to earth. They're very here in the perception. And the more that they're present here in the 3D, the more they're doing on the 5D, but they don't have their flow doesn't take them as high into accessing what's going on up here. But then you skip up a few families to me, an ethereal, we are constantly doing this. That's actually our energy signature, is hopping between the 5D and the 3D at rapid pace. So we're doing this in the cycle, right? So everyone has a different flow, and it is completely irrelevant to time. It's
Right.
unique to each of our perceptions through our blueprints, through our gift package, through our natural number, through our
Oh
energy,
yeah.
all of this. And we're not one dimensional, and we're not one size fits all.
No, no, we're not. And that shadow and light process is, I think, one of the big things that when people talk about New Earth and they talk about community consciousness and the world growing in this direction, we have some pretty horrible things going on right now, right? So we have a lot of horrible things going because I think, anyway, you can throw this out with the bathwater if you want to, but there's this idea that the more someone is afraid, the more they're going to do things that create more chaos. I look at it very much like raising children because I raised kids and I've worked in education for years. And I've worked with a lot of kids. Like many years ago, this random psychic person said, "You're going to have a lot of kids." And I went, "Oh, nope, nope, nope." But yeah, I have. I have legit had a lot of kids in my life.
Yeah,
And the one thing that has always proven true is that a child who does not feel safe will behave in a way that is in opposition to what they need.
right.
So, a kid who needs to be held and needs to be comforted and needs to be reinforced will say, will scream and yell and throw things and do things that someone might say, well, they're just looking for attention, ignore them. And I know that that's an opposite, that is a terrible thing to do. You need to
Yeah,
reach out, you need to spend time with them. And in a global sense, we have these huge, horrible things happening because people are not being seen. Somebody's afraid. Somebody doesn't understand that these changes can be done with equity. These
right.
changes can be done with coherence and recognition and honoring the culture, can honor whatever things that they're attached to religiously, like all these things that the fear based paradigm is what they have been swallowing for thousands of years. And they are terrified that if they let go of that fear paradigm, they will lose their in not individuality, but the cohesion. There's the idea of individuality where if you're an individual within a community and the community says you have to give up your individual needs and wants to be part of the community, that's unhealthy, right?
Right.
And then you have cohesive, supportive community. There's another word I'm looking for, but I can't find it right now. And that is where your individuality is honored in that community and you are supported for your individuality and your growth and your light and your shadow and all of that. And yet, community's needs are also supported, the group as a
Hmm.
whole. Um, People rail against communism and socialism. I'm like, yeah, I can see the toxicity in that. But I also kind of don't want to belong to a cult. I also kind of don't want to belong to a militaristic state.
Right.
Like, there's a way to find balance in this, people, and it
Yes.
doesn't have to be so hard.
And it doesn't have to be the us versus them. And then for me to have my needs met and my community to have our needs met, this community over here needs to be destroyed because there's
Right.
plenty to go around. And, just
Plenty.
speaking on fear, I have learned to be in such a radically different relationship with my fear. And I've been talking a lot about this particular image lately that I literally see my fear like a little child and I strap her to my chest. I put her in that little sling, right, that you carry babies around in. And I just say, okay, we're going along for the ride rather than getting hijacked by the fear and allowing that fear to talk me down from doing the brave thing, from doing the harmonized thing, right? Because you mentioned fear can, if we buy in too much to that, it can create chaos. So what if we're just like, okay, fear is a part of this, right? Because
Mhm.
fear comes from unknown a lot of the times. And I don't always know where I'm going to go, but I know I'm going to have my fear with me. We could snuggle, we could be together. And everyone else has that fear too. Might be a different
Oh, yeah.
flavor, right? The natural numbers teach us that there's different flavors, but I feel
Right.
like I feel like I know fear inside and out, and I just do things scared, and it doesn't have to create chaos anymore because I'm no longer in resistance with it. I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to flow with the fear, and that doesn't mean
Mhm.
that I have to take that out on anyone out here. It can be, and I just call it out now. When I get on a, a live stream for a new podcast that I've never been on, or I'm talking to someone new and they're like, "How are you doing?" I just straight up will say, "Well, I'm really glad to be here and I'm feeling a little anxious right now." I just call it into the room and then they're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
oh." And it humanizes us and it brings us together because we realize cuz I mean, almost everybody gets a little bit nervous before they go live or they speak on a stage or they meet someone new, right? Cuz it's the unknown. It is the unseen. And yes, the dark feels a little scary because we literally don't know what's in there. But the more that we hold ourselves back from trying to lean in anyway, from being willing to explore, the more that we miss these full dimensions of who we are and what we're here to do. So claiming our fear is an asset, right? It's that little bit of creative tension that like creates a little bit of like curiosity, right? Oh, what's going to be in there? And then when we can lean in with that, it just truly shifts so much. So I know we could literally talk for hours on this and my brain's already like, okay, well, where are we going to go next? Because I want to there's so much to talk about with the shadow and light, but I definitely think we met our purpose here today of getting into the flow state, right? Going into your action. So for me, the light and the shadow, light means action, doing, giving. Shadow means receiving, being, right? Like stillness. And so when we're flowing in and out of that, we also create this beautiful life rhythm. Oh, I'm resting and now I'm working and now I'm playing and now I'm with community and now I'm alone and now I'm back with people and all of the dimensions of life that come with this. So I hope this was super useful.
Yeah, I want to add one more thing about that flow with gifts because energy sensitives, I think, will understand that energy flow with emotion really easily. An empath, from what I understand and having worked with a lot of empaths will get caught in the, but how do I detangle it? How do I detangle my own emotional responses or feedback from somebody else's fear? How do I not be afraid if I know that the other person is afraid? How do I detangle from that? And one of the things that I've those that can visualize, because I know that there's those that can't visualize, so that makes it a little trickier. But one of the tools is that I use with a lot of empaths is pulling back your tentacles, pulling back your feelers, right?
Hmm.
And recognize that you are picking something up, but allow yourself to say, it's okay that I don't have to pull that all the way into me, and go to the bottom of what you're feeling, no matter how dark, no matter how icky it is. Go to the bottom of it and be okay that's okay. It's 100% okay. And acknowledge it first, because
Right.
you don't have to work on it, but you can acknowledge it, and it starts the action. It starts the movement that's needed, that catalyzing movement. And I use the word catalyzing a lot because catalyst is one of my life themes, so there's that. But you have to have something that catalyzes the movement within that circle 8. You have to catalyze something. Energetics, energy sensitives seem to kind of just get what catalyzing is,
Hmm.
but empaths don't always get that really, because their triggers are different, right?
Right.
Their actions are different. But you have to have something that catalyzes that movement to get that cycle moving so that you can go up into that realm and follow that flow. There's this amazing book that I still haven't read. I think I've read one chapter out of it and I really need to finish it, but it's called Flow. Anyway, the book is called Flow, and they're doing all this scientific studies trying to figure out how to help people learn how to get into flow. I haven't
Mm,
read it probably because I just do flow. I don't know how to not do flow.
right.
But there is a catalyst to create flow in everyone, and it is multidimensional, and it follows the shadow and the light. No matter what you do, whether you're drawing, whether you are creating a new thing, whether you are doing a job, whether you're starting a conversation, whether you are creating the foundation of a relationship, whether you are breaking a relationship, whether you are ending something and beginning something new, there is a catalyst somewhere in that creates the movement to keep it going.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why every single person on the planet, as far as I know, have two life beams. There's a reason for that. Like, you have to have two to keep the movement going.
Polarity, right? Going back to the how this whole universe is built, it is all built on the magnetism, the push, the pull, the ebb, the flow, the shadow, the light. And that
Yep.
the the sooner that we the sooner that we all accept that, the sooner this planet will actually be able to function in full flow. But that starts with us and anchoring it into us and anchoring in this ability to move our energy, move our emotions, move in and out and process them, catalyze them, transmute them into other forms. And yeah, I think since I'm an energy sensitive and an empath, I can definitely speak just super briefly to this as we're wrapping up that energy sensitives, right? We usually have to move the energy somehow through movement or the voice or vibration, whereas an empath needs to usually express the feeling through journaling or art or something else. I know we've talked about that before too, but those are tools. Like, even if you don't know if you're energy sensitive or an empath, like, experiment. Does journaling work
Yeah.
for me? Does wiggling it out work for me? Like, how do I take what I'm feeling, the energy, the emotion, and allow it to get back into movement instead of stuck right here? Like, right, I can't do anything with this. So do something
And
with
not
it, play with it.
forcing it into that toxic light place. Like,
Right.
I
Got to
mean,
do something with this right now. Oh no.
if one thing that we can do with these podcasts, Safrianna, is I really want to challenge the paradigm of healers. I really want to challenge that. Like, be real. Stop trying to. I'm yeah. It's so toxic, and it's harming your clients, and it's harming you, and it's harming our culture and our society, and we're just digging more into the fear paradigm.
Not everything needs to be fixed.
No.
Sometimes it's just our job to sit with the discomfort, and maybe we'll get Ike on here for an episode about talking about sitting in the discomfort, because that's like their
Yes.
now they have like had this
Oh,
massive aha of, oh my gosh, when I just sit here for a few moments in the discomfort, all this realization and energy moves, and I have downloads, and there, and again, that's
yes.
shadow. When we're allowed to sit in the shadow, everything just makes so much more sense, and things can get back into this flow. So, oh my gosh, we have so many more conversations to have, and I agree. If there's anything that our conversations are meant to do, it is to call healers in particular to be better with themselves so that they don't feel like they have to fix things in others, and they can
Yes.
bring others back to that soul level alignment of moving in and out of our own cosmic dance.
Yeah.
So,
That right there.
thank
Woo!
you as always, Red. We will be back with another episode, and maybe next week, maybe in 2 weeks. We'll see. It's Valentine's Day next week, and it's one of my partner's birthdays, and I think that I'm going to unhook from the toxic work paradigm and give myself
There
like
you go.
a week off. So we'll probably be back in 2 weeks with another conversation. If there's something in particular that you'd love us to expand upon, please let us.
Yeah.
We're so
Please.
here for that. Leave us a comment, send us an email, whatever our information
Yeah,
is
whatever.
in the comments or in the description. Thank you so much, Red, and thank you for those who watched. We'll see you next time.
Have a blessed day.